so much for being here today, and I also would like to thank the Humanities Center and all the people that made this possible. And what I'm going to present today is actually a very panoramic version of the book that I'm currently finishing with the assistance of the Humanities Center Fellowship. And I'm a scholar that combines several fields. I am a literary scholar, but I also combine historical, anthropological, and sociological perspectives to analyze the agency or the actions that the descendants of the Incas continued performing during the colonial period under Spanish rule. So my presentation today is focused on one of several strategies that the Incas of Cusco managed to preserve under Spanish rule. So in 1824, when the Spanish rule in the Andes had less than 1 year to go, the Inca nobility of Cusco expressed their support to the collapsing empire that had conquered them in 1532. As surprising as this may sound, the Inca royal descendants' defense of the colonial order was on their best interest against those of the pro-independence Spanish-American Creoles. As a noble group, the Incas of Cusco had managed not only to remain in existence for almost 300 years after the Spanish conquest, but to become an essential and a very accepted part of colonial society. And one may wonder, what was the key to this group's cohesion throughout almost 300 years? My research in the colonial archives, as well as my analysis of numerous references to the indigenous elites in the chronicles of this period, suggests that the continuation of marriage, and speaking about marriage in the very first talk today, marriage to noble Inca women in colonial society was key to the long-term cohesion of Inca nobility under Spanish rule. Now we have to understand that in the pre-Hispanic Andes, marriage was a central mechanism for preserving a special status among the Incas. At the height of the imperial expansion in the late 15th century, the 9th Inca, Inca Pachacutec, narrowed the imperial elite by privileging Capac people. Now I'm going to explain what Capac people is. Well, Capac derives from Manco Capac's name, the founder of the Inca dynasty. And let me just show you an image of, it's one of the several depictions of the initial Inca couple. Manco Capac's is shown on your right. So Capac people were the offspring of close kin marriages, such as those of siblings or first cousins that descended from this couple, Manco Capac and Mama Ocllo. So they were related among each other through both maternal and paternal lines. Both male and female children carried Capac status, but the contribution of women is of particular interest in the development of Inca and colonial history. During the late Inca period, the pair-to-room succession path was ideally to be a full brother and sister, children of the Inca ruler and his sister wife. A problem emerged when the wife of Huayna Capac, the last Inca ruler when the Spaniards arrived, bore no sons. As a result, after his death in the late 1520s, a fratricidal civil war broke out between two of his sons, Atahualpa and Huáscar. Their mothers came from different lineages. We really do not know the true identity of this woman. It is very elusive. But everything seems to indicate that at least one of them, the mothers, was not a Capac woman. It was most likely Atahualpa's mother. So before the Spaniards arrived in the Andes through the north, Atahualpa had defeated Huáscar's army in the south. To strengthen his position, he ordered that all traces of Huáscar be erased and his relatives be killed, with the exception of some of his sisters. Atahualpa's intention in sparing the lives of this woman, these sisters, was to make them his wives, to reconcentrate Capac status in the next generation and thus have a better claim to rule. By marrying this woman and having children with them, Atahualpa would be one step ahead of the political game. As I just have explained a few moments ago, the Incas have created a culturally and symbolical power ideology through bloodlines and legitimized through an interplay of agency and structure. The royal dispositions of noble Incas were a habitus, or in other words, socialized norms that encouraged ethnic difference and superiority. They followed a tradition of close-kin marriages, forbidden to ordinary people, but required to the descendants of the sun. Here's an Inca family tree where you can see the importance of the couple in the lineage of the Incas that continued in the decades to follow this change. So the arrival of the Spaniards interrupted claims for Inca sovereignty, but it did not eliminate them. A few months after the capture of Atahualpa in 1532, the Inca offered one of his sisters to the Spanish conquistador Francisco Pizarro. He wanted to forge bonds with the newcomers, but he reserved the more Capac women for himself. So again, we see this strategy happening again and again. With Atahualpa's death in Spanish hands, other sons of Huayna Capac declared their claims to rule, and to strengthen their authority, they also sought to marry this woman during the initial contact period. And one may wonder, how did this woman feel about all these exchanges? The records of this period indicate that their actions, the records of this period indicate that they were not only conscious of their political roles, but active participants in the main historical events of the colonial period. Now, some caveats are necessary to make here. Indigenous societies underwent enormous changes upon the Spanish conquest. Between the colonial reforms, the epidemics, the population decline was catastrophic. And also pre-conquest civilizations suffered from the imposition of Christianity, monogamy, literacy, and new legal codes to govern them. To adapt to these new rules, the colonial Incas had to shift their practices in relation to specific contexts and over time. But these dislocations to the Andean world did not destroy the Indian elite and the importance they attributed to their pre-conquest lineages. The propensities to think and feel and act as nobles occurred unconsciously and guided them to act in very determined ways. And I'm going to focus in a period that it's key to understand Inca history. Between 1536 and 1572, an Inca faction rebelled against Spanish monarchy and established a utopian Inca empire in Vilcabamba, just north of Cusco. So in the map you can see indicated where the region of Vilcabamba is, and probably you know that Cusco is the center of Inca society. It was certainly their capital, and by moving to this remote location, this group of Incas wanted to reestablish their norms and maintain their practices. So the exiled Incas continued practicing a high degree of endogamy and polygamy that allowed them to reconcentrate Capac status, but at a smaller scale. Meanwhile, in Cusco, there were other Inca factions that remained in Cusco. So Spanish authorities and Inca nobles constructed another form of colonial nobility that emphasized on purity of blood through monogamy instead of polygamy. In 1545, King Charles V granted the Incas of Cusco patents of nobility that required the Spanish official to respect these people's privileges. The Spanish political tactic aimed at controlling the rest of the native population, whom they thought would remain loyal to their former rulers. Nonetheless, a concern about the Vilcabamba faction, let me just go back to show you this. So there was a constant concern about this Inca faction that remained in this very remote region because they continually attacked the Spanish state. So to negotiate for peace with them, they successfully brought out this Inca couple. It is Inca Saidi Tupac and his sister wife, Cusihuarcay. They came out of Vilcabamba in 1558, traveled out of the jungle to the highland city of Cusco. As you can see in this image by the Andean author Guamán Poma de Ayala, the Spanish bishop of Cusco baptized them first and married them to each other in the eyes of the church. This accepted incestuous marriage, maybe surprising for some, show that to what extent nobility was a value that removed all social and religious prejudices and taboos. As the Spanish crown imposed monogamy among these Incas, these Incas that remained in Cusco, and the ones that came out of Vilcabamba, resorted to intermarry within equally noble lineages and households. The cases I highlight in the larger portion of my manuscript show that it was the Inca women's lineage that strengthened a person's claims for privileges through the colonial period. I'm going to show you this example. This is the case of Doña Beatriz Clara Coya. She is the daughter of this incestuous couple. So she is a very important person in 17th century Peru. She not only inherited her parents' royal condition, but also a very wealthy state. She was a very attractive match for both Incas and Spaniards. First, she was set out to marry her own cousin, Don Felipe Quispertito. He also came out of Vilcabamba. But the Spanish authorities, afraid that this union, Beatriz and her Inca cousin, would constitute a powerful economic front for the natives, married her to the Spaniard Don Martín Garcia de Loyola, a relative of the founders of the Jesuit order. And as this picture depicts, the founders of the Jesuit order are right placed in the middle. So that implies a close connection of Inca elites and the Catholic elites as well. While this marriage appears to be a defeat of Inca nobility, it became an asset to the Incas of Cusco as a whole. How come? Such was the importance of this Inca princess in the colonial Andes that rumors spread that Don Martín Garcia de Loyola wanted to make her Queen of Peru. This obviously did not happen. But through this very marriage, the noble Incas declared their peculiar and close ties to the Jesuits. Now, this is not the only painting that exists of this marriage. Actually, there's another marriage here. It's their daughter marrying another noble of Spain. But series of paintings based on this event and maybe based on this very painting exist and depict this marriage. And these pictures hang in several churches, convents, museums, and private collections to this day. More importantly, wills and testaments from noble Indians, ordered in the 17th and 18th centuries, list reproductions of this painting among their possessions. So it is very interesting to read the wills and testaments of people that list a copy of this painting as part of their possessions, because that is a very political tool for them. More generally, the depictions of this iconic marriage serve as a cultural bond between Spanish Catholicism and Inca nobility. From the indigenous point of view, this marriage and its economic power was not only a rich household linked to Castilian nobility, but also a symbol of Inca power. Interracial marriages such as this one were the exception rather than the rule. But the fact that even in this case, the Doña Beatriz Clara Coya's lineage was perceived as equal or even better in quality than that of her Spanish husband is very telling. In most cases I explore in my book, in which Inca descendants request royal grants, tribute exceptions, annual pensions, or chieftain offices, it appears that the importance of the female line is crucial to their arguments, whether or not the Spanish authorities thought of it this way. In reading my textual sources for this Inca cultural signs, I aim to map the native epistemologies to the pre-contact Inca nobles that were transferred to various domains of practice in a new colonial setting, which explains the coherence of the marital and political choices within and among individuals or of similar statuses. At this point, and also to conclude today, I think it is safe to say that the interaction of the symbolic capital and legal privileges of the Inca descendants, tied with the economic opportunities of one of Peru's most historical region, Cusco, enabled a colonial urban Inca nobility to survive for centuries. Thank you.
Okay, we certainly have a few minutes left for questions for Dr. Guengerich. So,
I saw a picture of the Indian Mama Oto, and I know that the famous poet Garcilaso de la Vega was the son of a Spanish conqueror and an Indian whose name was Octo. That was the mother, or which is the?
Well, this is a very mythical couple, so we don't know whether they existed or not. There are versions of the origins of the Inca, and this is one of them. But yes, the Inca Garcilaso does reference this couple in his text, and as I say, it's one of to maintain elite or the symbolic power of an elite person in the Andean region or in the indigenous culture of the Incas. Names were very important. So name patterns transmit throughout generations. So Oglio was certainly one of them. When you look in the archives today, whether you are in Peru or in Spain, you find numerous references to people that are that share the same names, or last names, if you want to call them that way. So that would be one of their links to their former ancestors.
So was all this apparatus of Inca aristocracy swept away with independence in Peru?
Basically, my book covers until 1825, actually, and it is with independence when the nations that were under Spanish, now nations that were under Spanish control, become actually republics. That's when the differences of indigenous elites versus indigenous commoners totally disappears.
Yeah.
So that's basically what sweeps up the difference, the social differences there. Yes.
Thanks. I love this talk. I was just wondering so aside from having this kind of really symbolic importance
Yeah.
with marriage, what kind of daily authority do these women have? They have legal authority or kind of financial autonomy, or how are they comparing to the Spanish women who are in Peru?
Yes, that's a good question. We have to understand that there were many changes, of course, under Spanish rule, and one of them was holding office, political office. For example, the political offices, we can say that pre-contact political offices were called cacicazgos, which are chieftains, local chieftains. So there are versions saying that women used to hold these offices before. But in most cases, I think it is used as a discourse to justify that a woman could still hold office. I've seen cases, even in the 18th century, early 18th century, where there are cacicas listed as the person in charge of collecting the tribute, making sure that the census records are up to date, and but in most cases they have to be married, and their husbands administer that cacicazgo. So whether they inherited through noble lines, still this have to be managed by their husband.